Life is not a game you win. It's a burden you learn to carry with strength. Every one of us has been handed challenges, chaos, and responsibilities we didn't ask for. But the truth is, your life is shaped not by what happens to you, but by how you respond. And if you're willing to take responsibility to stand tall in the face of difficulty, you can build a life of meaning so profound it carries you through suffering. And if most people wake up in the morning and immediately look for something to blame, they blame their parents for not raising them properly, their boss for not recognizing their worth, the government for not making life easier, the economy for being unfair, or the universe itself for stacking the odds against them. And yes, life is unfair. Nobody would deny that. Some people are born into privilege, while others are born into crushing poverty. Some inherit good health. Others inherit sickness. Some find themselves surrounded by love. Others are abandoned from the very beginning. But here's the hard truth: blaming doesn't change your circumstances. Complaining doesn't lighten your burden. In fact, every time you complain, you strengthen the very chains that keep you stuck where you are. Responsibility is the antidote to despair. Responsibility is the act of saying, no matter what I've been given, I will carry it the best I can, and I will transform it into something meaningful. It's not about denying the unfairness of life, but about recognizing that your energy is better spent on building than on blaming. Imagine two people with the exact same circumstances. One spends his days complaining, indulging in bitterness, and waiting for someone else to fix his problems. The other says, this is my life and no one is coming to save me, so I will start with what's in front of me. 10 years later, they will be living in completely different worlds. The first man will have sunk deeper into resentment. The second will have climbed higher than he ever thought possible. Start with small responsibilities. People underestimate how much order comes from little things. Clean your room, organize your desk, pay your bills on time. These acts sound trivial, but they are not. They represent something larger. The willingness to voluntarily confront the chaos of life and turn it into structure. If you can't even manage the small responsibilities directly in front of you, how can you possibly hope to manage the greater challenges life will inevitably throw your way? Responsibility scales upward. The more you take on and carry well, the stronger you become. There is a psychological transformation that occurs when you accept responsibility. You begin to see yourself not as a victim of circumstance, but as an agent of change. Your posture changes, literally and metaphorically. When you're always blaming, your shoulders slump, your voice weakens, and your vision narrows. But when you say, I will own my choices, I will carry this burden, something shifts inside you. You stand straighter. You speak clearer. You begin to notice opportunities you didn't see before because responsibility sharpens perception. Of course, responsibility is not easy. It requires sacrifice. It often means doing what you don't want to do in the moment in order to build the kind of future you can respect. It means admitting your own flaws instead of pointing fingers outward. It means saying, well, perhaps my parents weren't perfect, but now I am an adult and their failures are no longer an excuse for mine. It means saying, Wes, the system is flawed, but I will play the best game I can within it, instead of sitting on the sidelines. Responsibility hurts at first. It feels heavy like weightlifting. But just like in the gym, the more you carry, the stronger you become. People often ask, where do I even begin? You begin with yourself. You don't fix the world before you fix your own habits. Don't talk about saving humanity if you can't even show up to work on time. Don't preach about justice if you can't keep your own promises. Order your personal world first. And once you've done that, then and only then, you are in a position to take on greater responsibilities like helping your family, your community, maybe even the world at large. Responsibility begins with humility, with recognizing how much work you have to do on yourself before you can dare to criticize everything else. And here's the paradox: responsibility doesn't imprison you. It frees you. People think freedom is doing whatever you want, whenever you want, without obligation. That's not freedom. That's chaos. Real freedom comes from discipline, from structure, from voluntarily taking on responsibility and mastering yourself. A person who has learned to carry responsibility is no longer a slave to impulse, no longer tossed around by circumstance. He has direction, purpose, and stability. He becomes the kind of person who can be relied upon, trusted, respected. So before you open your mouth to complain, stop and ask, have I truly carried all that I could carry? Have I organized my own life enough to have the right to criticize the world outside of me? If the answer is no, then the solution is not to whine louder. It's to shoulder the responsibility directly in front of you and build from there. Responsibility is the foundation of a meaningful life, and the only path out of bitterness and despair that inspires others to do the same. We live in a culture obsessed with happiness. Everywhere you turn, you're told to chase it. Advertisements promise you'll be happy if you buy their product. Self-help books say happiness is just a matter of positive thinking. Social media parades endless smiles and curated lifestyles they want to do, convincing you that everyone else is living in constant joy while you're left behind. But here's the problem: happiness is not something you can catch and hold. It slips through your fingers the moment you think you've got it. Happiness is fleeting. It rises and falls with circumstances, and circumstances are often beyond your control. If you base your life on the pursuit of happiness, you will be endlessly disappointed. Think about it. One day you get a promotion and you feel on top of the world. But a week later, the stress of the new position sets in and the happiness fades. You buy something you've been wanting and it excites you for a while, but soon enough, it becomes just another possession collecting dust in your home. Even relationships, as beautiful as they can be, will not provide you with a constant state of happiness. The same person who brings you joy today can frustrate or even hurt you tomorrow. That doesn't mean these things are worthless. It just means they are not the foundation on which to build your life. What you need instead is meaning. Meaning is deeper, sturdier, and far more reliable than happiness. Meaning doesn't dissolve when suffering arrives, and suffering will arrive. It always does. At some point, you will face loss, illness, betrayal, or failure. In those moments, happiness is useless. But meaning, that sense of doing something worthwhile, of carrying a responsibility larger than yourself, can carry you through the worst of times. If your life is built on happiness, tragedy will shatter you. If your life is built on meaning, Tragedy becomes bearable because you know your struggle is not in vain. How do you find meaning? You don't find it by asking, what will make me feel good? You find it by asking, what is worth suffering for? That's the key. Meaning is discovered in the things that matter so much to you that you are willing to endure pain, sacrifice, and struggle for their sake. A parent doesn't wake up at 3 a.m. to feed a crying baby because it makes them happy. They do it because raising that child is meaningful. A student doesn't stay up late studying for an exam because it feels good. They do it because achieving mastery and creating a better future carries weight and purpose. The same applies to any goal worth pursuing. The things that matter most will often demand discomfort, but they give back something far greater than temporary pleasure. They give back meaning. There's also a misconception that meaning is always grand or dramatic. People imagine they have to cure diseases, change governments, or achieve worldwide fame to live a meaningful life. That's nonsense. Meaning often hides in the ordinary. It's in showing up for work and doing your job honestly. It's in taking care of your family. It's in building friendships based on trust. It's in committing to something and seeing it through even when it gets hard. Meaning is not about scale. It's about depth. You don't need the whole world to applaud you to know your life matters. Sometimes it's enough that one person depends on you, that one person's life is better because of what you chose to do. Of course, pursuing meaning comes at a cost. It requires responsibility. It requires that you carry weight instead of avoiding it. And many people don't want that. They want the lightness of happiness without the heaviness of responsibility. But that lightness is shallow. It leaves you drifting, aimless, and empty. The weight of responsibility, on the other hand, grounds you. It gives you a reason to wake up in the morning, even when you don't feel like it. And strangely enough, when you take on responsibility and live a meaningful life, happiness often shows up anyway. Not as the goal, but as a byproduct. Think of it this way, happiness is like a butterfly. The more you chase it, the more it flutters away. But if you sit still, live rightly, and focus on something meaningful, happiness often lands gently on your shoulder when you least expect it. That's why the pursuit of happiness is misguided. It's not something to chase directly. It's something that emerges when you pursue meaning. So don't ask yourself, what will make me happy? Ask instead, what will make my suffering worthwhile? Because when you align your life with that question, you stop drifting aimlessly. You stop being tossed around by every emotional high and low. You begin to live with depth, with purpose, with strength. Happiness may come and go, but meaning will stay with you, anchoring you through every storm. There is something corrosive about lies. You might think that a small lie here or there is harmless, that bending the truth to avoid embarrassment or conflict doesn't really matter. But every time you lie, you compromise your relationship with reality. And reality has a way of catching up with you. A lie is not just a distortion of words, it's a distortion of being. It's the creation of a false world, one you then have to inhabit and defend. And once you begin to live in that false world, you begin to lose track of what is real, of what is solid, of what can actually sustain you. Lies are seductive because they offer short-term relief. Lie to avoid admitting you failed. You lie to avoid hurting someone's feelings. You lie to make yourself look better than you are. And in the moment, it feels like you've escaped. But what you've really done is planted a seed that will grow into something poisonous. Because the truth doesn't go away when you ignore it. It waits. And the longer you avoid it, the larger it becomes, until eventually it crashes through the fragile structure of deception you've built. Telling the truth is painful. It exposes your flaws. It makes you vulnerable. It often leads to conflict. But that pain is cleansing. It strips away illusions and forces you to confront life as it actually is, not as you wish it to be. And though that can feel unbearable in a moment, it's ultimately the only path that leads to freedom. Because when you live truthfully, you don't have to keep track of your lies. You don't have to act a part, or remember the script, or worry about being exposed. You simply are who you are, and that gives you strength. Think about relationships. If you build them on lies, whether it's with a partner, a friend, or a colleague, they might last for a while, but they are hollow. The moment the truth comes out, and it always does, trust collapses, and trust is nearly impossible to fully rebuild once it's broken. But when you tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, you create relationships that are resilient because they're built on reality, not illusion. People can rely on you. They may not always like what you say, but they will know that when you speak, they're getting honesty. There's another dimension to this, and it has to do with your own perception of yourself. When you lie, you create distance between who you really are and who you pretend to be. And the greater that distance becomes, the more fragmented and anxious you feel. It's like trying to stand on shifting sand. You're never stable, never grounded. But when you speak the truth, even haltingly, even imperfectly, you align your inner world with your outer one. You become integrated, and that integration brings a sense of strength and clarity that no lie can ever provide. Of course, telling the truth doesn't mean being cruel. It doesn't mean blurting out every thought that crosses your mind, regardless of its impact. It means striving for honesty in a way that is constructive, not destructive. It means refusing to manipulate others with falsehoods. It means admitting when you don't know instead of pretending that you do. It means speaking in a way that aims reality, not distortion. There will be times when you feel the pressure to lie, when silence or dishonesty seems easier. But consider what happens if you keep choosing that path. You end up living in a web of deceit, and eventually the web closes in on you. Lies make you weak because they demand constant maintenance. One lie leads to another, then another, until you're tangled in threads you can't escape. Truth makes you strong because it clears the air. It removes the burden of pretense. It may cause short-term pain, but it leads to long-term stability. And here's something even deeper. Truth is the foundation of meaning. If you lie, you cannot find meaning because meaning requires reality. You cannot build a life of purpose on a foundation of deceit. It will crumble under its own weight. Meaning emerges when you orient yourself honestly toward the world, when you confront things as they are, no matter how harsh, and still choose to carry your burden with dignity. Truth and meaning are inseparable. So when you're tempted to lie, ask yourself what kind of person you want to be. Do you want to be someone who hides, manipulates, and deceives, constantly fearing exposure? Or do you want to be someone who can stand tall, look others in the eye, and say, what I am telling you is real? Lays may bring comfort for a moment, but truth brings strength for a lifetime. And even if you can't always manage to tell the truth, then at least resolve not to lie. That commitment alone can transform the way you see yourself and the way the world sees you. Fear is one of the most powerful forces in human life. It shapes our decisions, often without us even realizing it. It whispers in the back of our minds, convincing us to stay comfortable, to avoid risk, to shrink away from challenges. First, listening to fear feels safe. You avoid embarrassment, you avoid rejection, you avoid failure. But the truth is, every time you give in to fear, your world gets smaller. You become weaker, not stronger. You build a prison around yourself, one choice at a time, until you can no longer move freely. The things you are most afraid of usually point directly to the places where growth is waiting. If you fear speaking in public, that fear marks exactly where your potential is hiding. If you fear trying and failing, it means you are standing on the edge of an opportunity that could change you. Fear is like a compass. It shows you where the treasure lies. But most people turn the other way. They see the signpost of fear and run in the opposite direction. The problem is that what you avoid does not disappear. It grows. Fear left in the dark multiplies. It festers. And what could have been a challenge becomes a monster. There's a psychological truth about fear. The more you confront it, the smaller it becomes. Imagine you are terrified of confronting someone who mistreated you. The longer you avoid them, the more power they hold over you in your imagination. You picture the worst possible outcome again and again until the thought of speaking up feels unbearable. But if you gather your courage and finally face them, you usually discover that reality is less terrifying than the story you've built in your head. By taking one bold step into the thing you fear, you shrink it, you weaken it, and you grow stronger in the process. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the decision to act despite fear. Nobody is fearless, not truly. Even the bravest people you admire carry fear inside them. The difference is that they've trained themselves not to be paralyzed by it. They've accepted that fear is part of the journey. You cannot eliminate it, but you can learn to carry it. And when you do, you realize that fear itself can become fuel. It sharpens your focus. It reminds you that what you're doing matters. There is no growth without fear. If your life is comfortable, predictable, and safe, it is also stagnant. You don't become strong by staying in places where nothing challenges you. You become strong by moving directly toward the things that scare you most. Think of an athlete who pushes through physical discomfort to get stronger. Fear is like that discomfort. It's the signal that you're stretching, that you're stepping into territory where growth happens. If you only do what feels easy, you stay the same. If you lean into fear, you transform. You might ask, where do I start? Start small. If you're terrified of speaking up, do practice with one honest sentence in a conversation where you'd normally stay silent. If you're afraid of trying something new, commit to the smallest possible step, just enough to face the fear in a manageable way. Each time you do this, you build courage like a muscle. Over time, you'll look back and realize you are no longer the same person. You're stronger, braver, and more capable because you've trained yourself to confront what you once ran from. Avoidance is easy in the short term, but costly in the long term. Imagine two lives. One where every time fear appears, you retreat, and another where every time fear appears, you step forward. 10 years later, the first life will be small and limited, bound by invisible walls built out of avoidance. The second life will be expansive, filled with experiences, challenges, and victories earned walking into fear and fear instead of running away. Which life do you want to live? The reality is that life itself is terrifying. It ends in death. It is filled with uncertainty, with chaos, with pain you cannot control. But hiding does not protect you from those truths. All hiding does is make you weaker when the inevitable challenges come. The only way to live with strength is to confront fear head on again and again until it no longer rules you. Each time you face it, you become more prepared to handle the next challenge and the next, until eventually you realize that fear has lost its grip on you. So when fear rises in your chest, don't tell yourself you'll deal with it tomorrow. Step into it, even trembling, even uncertain, because every time you do, you reclaim a piece of your life that fear tried to steal. And piece by piece, step by step, you build a life that is larger than fear, a life that belongs fully to you. Most people live far below their potential, not because they aren't capable, but they've convinced themselves that aiming high is unrealistic. They settle for mediocrity because it feels safe, because it spares them the risk of failure, because it keeps them within the boundaries of what is familiar. And yet, deep down, there's a quiet voice that whispers they could be more, that they're wasting something vital inside themselves. You can try to silence that voice, but it never really goes away. It reminds you in moments of stillness that you are living beneath your possibilities. The truth is, most limits are self-imposed. You decide what you're capable of long before life ever tests you. You look at your weaknesses, your doubts, your failures, and you create a ceiling in your mind. I can't go beyond this point, you tell yourself. But that ceiling is an illusion. It's made of fear, not fact. Human beings are capable of extraordinary things when they aim higher than they think possible and refuse to let setbacks define them. Look at anyone who has ever achieved something remarkable. They were not superhuman. They were not born with magical talents that separated them from everyone else. They were people who dared to raise their aim beyond what felt comfortable and then disciplined themselves to pursue it relentlessly. Aiming higher does not mean expecting perfection overnight. It means choosing a goal that stretches you, that frightens you a little, that demands more of you than you currently are. If your goals don't intimidate you, they are not big enough. Because the very act of striving toward something larger than yourself transforms you. The point is not just to achieve the goal, but to become the kind of person who is capable of achieving it. Growth always comes before reward. The problem is that people are terrified of aiming high because it raises the possibility of failure. If you set a modest goal and achieve it, you can feel satisfied without risking too much. But if you set a goal that truly challenges you and you fail, the disappointment can be crushing. That fear keeps people anchored in mediocrity. But here's the paradox. Failure is not the enemy. It is the price of growth. Every person who has ever achieved greatness has failed, often many times. The difference is that they refuse to let failure define them. They saw failure as feedback, as part of the process of climbing higher. If you're not failing sometimes, it means you're not aiming high enough. Consider how much time passes whether you aim high or not. 10 years from now, you will still be 10 years older. The question is, will you be the same person you are today, repeating the same routines, stuck in the same patterns, or will you be someone who dared to aim higher and became stronger because of it? People underestimate how much progress they can make in a decade of consistent effort. They think the mountain is too high to climb, so they don't take the first step. But mountains are conquered step by step, day after day. Aim for the peak and focus on the next foothold. Before you know it, you'll be higher than you ever imagined possible. There is also a moral dimension to aiming high. When you aim low, you don't just cheat yourself. You cheat everyone around you. Your family, your friends, your community, they are all impacted by whether you choose to live at your potential or not. A small, timid life does not just shrink you, it deprives others of the strength, the wisdom, and the inspiration you might have offered if you had dared to aim higher. And conversely, when you push yourself beyond your comfort zone, you give others permission to do the same. Your courage becomes contagious. Your growth raises the standard for those around you. It is not arrogant to aim high, it is necessary. Arrogance is thinking you deserve success without sacrifice. Aiming high is about accepting the responsibility to strive, to discipline yourself, to become something more than you are now. It's about refusing to waste your potential, refusing to settle for mediocrity, refusing to live a life that is smaller than it could be. So, set your aim higher than you think possible. Choose a goal that makes you nervous when you say it out loud. Break it down into small steps and begin. Each step will build momentum. Each act of discipline will fuel the next. And eventually, you will find yourself achieving things you once thought were beyond you. And even if you fall short of the highest peak, you will still have climbed higher than you ever would have if you had set your sights low. Life is heavy. There's no escaping that truth. To be alive is to suffer in one form or another. You will face loss, failure, illness, betrayal, and the certainty of death. The people around you will face the same. And no amount of denial, distraction, or indulgence will erase that reality. Many people respond to this by running away from responsibility, by trying to avoid the weight of existence altogether. They live only for comfort, for distraction, for temporary relief. But that path doesn't make the burden lighter. It makes it heavier, because when you refuse to carry your share of responsibility, the world does not become easier. It becomes chaotic, and you become weaker. To live properly is to accept that you have a burden to carry, and that carrying it is the very thing that gives life dignity. You might not have chosen your particular weight. Some people are handed more suffering than others. But you always have a choice about how you respond to it. You can resent it, complain about it, and let it crush you. Or you can straighten your back, take hold of it, and carry it as well as you possibly can. That decision to bear the weight voluntarily is the dividing line between a life of despair and a life of meaning. when you take up responsibility, something remarkable happens. The very things that once felt unbearable begin to shape you into someone stronger. The daily struggles, the obligations, the sacrifices. They are not just punishments. They are opportunities for growth. They mold your character, sharpen your endurance, and forge resilience. People who refuse responsibility often remain fragile, easily broken by the smallest hardship. People who embrace responsibility, even reluctantly, discover that they can endure far more than they imagined. But carrying your own burden is only half of the task. The other half is to help others carry theirs. Because life is not just suffering for you. It is suffering for everyone. And while you cannot eliminate that fact, you can make it more bearable. You can choose to be someone who lightens the load rather than someone who adds to it. Think about the kind of person you admire most. Are they the ones who make everything about themselves, who complain endlessly, who spread their misery to everyone around them, or are they the ones who show up, who help, who offer strength in the moments when life feels unbearable? You know the answer. The people who inspire us are the ones who carry their own burdens with dignity and extend a hand to others along the way. Helping others does not mean rescuing them from every hardship or shielding them from responsibility. That would weaken them. It means standing beside them, offering encouragement, sharing wisdom, and lending strength when their load threatens to break them. Sometimes it's as simple as listening without judgment or offering a word of truth when it's easier to remain silent, or being present when someone is drowning in loneliness. You cannot fix the tragedy of life for another person, but you can walk with them through it. And that makes all the difference. They want to do. There is also a kind of paradox here. When you help others carry their burden, your own becomes lighter, not because the weight disappears, but because you realize you are part of something larger than yourself. Suffering shared is suffering diminished. And when you choose to serve others, you discover a meaning that far outweighs the heaviness of your own pain. That is why some of the strongest, most resilient people you will ever meet are those who have endured incredible suffering and yet chosen to use it as a way to help others. They transform their pain into compassion, their loss into wisdom, their hardship into strength. And in doing so, they created lives of profound significance. So the task before you is clear: carry your own burden with as much strength and honesty as you can. And then, when possible, help others carry theirs. Don't look away from their suffering. Don't turn your back on the weight of existence. Step into it, shoulder it, and prove to yourself that you are capable of more than you imagine. This is not an easy path, but it is the only path that leads to a life you can respect. Because in the end, the measure of a person is not how little they suffered, but how well they carried what was theirs to bear and how much they lifted the lives of those around them along the way.